Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, the so-called Barack Obama birth certificate conspiracy theory is not going away anytime soon. In fact, there is a renewed effort by criminal investigators and law enforcement to expose what they're calling evidence of fraud and forgery. That is, by the way, that's a federal offense. And check this out. The evidence does not suggest that Barack Obama was born outside of the United States. No. There is compelling evidence that suggests the big lie. And the whole reason behind the forgery to begin with was to cover up the identity of Barack Obama's real father. Joe Gilbert is with us now, and he is the writer and director of the groundbreaking documentary Dreams from My Real Father. And since the film was released in 2012, a lot of new evidence has surfaced, including some brand new bombshell information that he is going to share with us right now. Joe Gilbert, thanks for being here. Let's start from the very beginning, because a lot of people, as soon as they hear this birther controversy, they've been indoctrinated by the mainstream media. They've been conditioned just to stop. It's a conspiracy theory. I don't believe it. I don't even want to hear about it. What evidence do we have that it's a fraud?
Okay, so here's where it came from is back in 2008, Barack Obama burst on the scene. He said, that he'd been a mainstream politician his whole life. And he based his candidacy on his personal story. His book, Dreams from My Father, he said, my father was a goat herder from Kenya. I'm uniquely qualified to bring people together with my unique background. And people started to ask questions about him because they never heard of him before. And they said, well, can we see your college records? He said, well, no, you can't see those. Lock and key. Well, what about your state Senate records? Your record as a state senator in Illinois. Completely locked away. What about, you said your father's from Kenya, you grew up in Indonesia. Could we release your birth documents like every other candidate? He said no. So the people that asked the questions were legitimate questions about who is this guy? And everywhere you looked, you saw radical connections. He was for 20 years in Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church, Goddamn America, anti-white, anti-American worldview. Michelle Obama certainly didn't have a lot of nice things to say about America. That's his wife. His mentor, who he'd been on the Woods Foundation with, and alleged just his neighbor, was terrorist emeritus Bill Ayers, notorious America hater. And he also wrote in his book that he was raised by one Frank Marshall Davis, the Soviet agent and radical black Bolshevik communist out of Chicago who had moved to Hawaii. So we just kept asking questions. You don't seem like this mainstream politician. You say you're going to cut the deficit in half. You're going to respect the Constitution. He said he would, support Israel, all this mainstream stuff. But it didn't match what little we knew of his record. So,
well, meanwhile, he's a complete ghost candidate at the time. Now he's a ghost president. Correct. We don't know a lot about his past, and it just raises suspicion when you don't supply people with the documents. So this is not just forged documents. We're talking about documents that have simply been kept from the public record.
Correct. And what happened was the mainstream media, instead of asking the question or going out to Hawaii, I went to Hawaii twice, which is twice as much as the multi-billion-dollar mainstream media combined, simply to ask questions for people that knew Obama, that knew Frank Marshall Davis. And I inquired a tremendous amount of information and a mountain of evidence that Obama's real biological father was, in fact, the Soviet agent Frank Marshall Davis, and that Davis radicalized Obama in his youth into this anti-white, anti-American ideology, such that when Obama wrote in his book, I went to Occidental College to study with Marxist professors. Well, who does that? Well, someone that was radicalized into this worldview went to socialist scholars conferences, the Communist Party meetings in New York City at Union Hall, went to Chicago and became an organizer. So we asked the question. Now, the mainstream media, in order to help Obama and cover all this up, invented a smear term, birther, and invented a religion, birtherism, to dismiss anybody who simply asked a question. They just as easily could have come up with the term universityism for those that wanted to see his college records.
Well, the birther thing, and even Hillary Clinton has accused Donald Trump for being a racist for simply asking about the birth certificate. And the mainstream media has also been extremely critical of Alex Jones and Infowars, even implying that Donald Trump gets his intelligence reports from Infowars. And one of the crazy conspiracy theories that they always say that comes out of Infowars, long list of them, but one of them is the birth certificate of Barack Obama. And check out this hit piece from CNN from just last week on the Clinton News Network.
Donald Trump and Alex Jones, the conservative conspiracy theorist and operator of the website Infowars, which seems to be a place where Trump gets a lot of his information. Jones can take credit for spearheading some of the most outrageous theories on the internet. Jones' theories reach tens of millions each month and are now often echoed by the next president of the United States. Take President Obama's birth.
Trump comes along and said, birth certificate. He gave a birth certificate. Whether or not that was a real certificate, because a lot of people question it, I certainly question it.
So there you go. And this is something that we're seeing. This is the latest thing out of the mainstream news media. It's replacing the whole conspiracy theory narrative is now the fake news narrative. And they are pushing this real hard right now. And they're also, of course, pushing the whole racist thing. Have you been called a racist for simply questioning the birth certificate?
Occasionally. Look, I questioned his political ideology. Where did it come from? I think we've proven that the real biological father who became the ideological mentor was Frank Marshall Davis. Obama's even admitted it. And that reveals a radical ideology, and it debunks his candidacy where he said he was a mainstream candidate. The birth certificates I'm releasing today with you guys for the first time, it's a black man born in Hawaii a few weeks before Obama and another one born a few weeks after. Most people are familiar with the fact that Obama's father's race on his birth certificate is listed as African. A term, African American, was never used at that time.
That's right. This is the 60s.
And the state of Hawaii had very strict criteria that they used at the Department of Health to designate race. And of course, the birth certificates I'm releasing, they show the race of the father as Negro, not African. And you can even just see how Obama's document is based on a white background and how phony it looks. I think the reason Obama refused to release it for several years and ended up being forced to was because had he released it, it would have revealed probably the father being blank, unknown, or possibly even Frank Marshall Davis, that would have debunked his entire story of the international marriage and his father being from Kenya. And it would reveal his entire political ideology was very different from what he told the electorate.
So, and I think this, do you think this was a sleight of hand or a diversion to talk about him being born in Kenya, that was the conspiracy theory, but the real evidence suggests that the cover-up and the forgery was to cover up the fact that his real father was Frank Marshall Davis?
I think Obama used the Kenyan father at various times in his life to create a sexier background or a more interesting story when it served him. Very possibly when he went to Occidental College. He probably was there as a foreign student, either from Indonesia or Kenyan background. He used, of course, the Kenyan father to hide his connection to Frank Marshall Davis. And his entire life and political career, he's been trying to hide that connection because it would expose all the radicalism that we've seen in his presidency.
When did he learn himself that and you have a story about the airport incident where he learned that Frank Marshall Davis was his father?
Well, Keith Kakagawa, his best friend, who he refers to as Ray in his book, Dreams from My Father, I've befriended. He's in Corcoran State Prison in Central California. I visited him there several times. We exchanged many phone calls and letters. And he told me this amazing story that Keith himself was with Obama in the Ala Manoa Mall in Waikiki, 1977, and Obama recognized the Kenyan Obama in a sporting goods store, ran over and said, "Are you Barack Obama?" He said, "Yes." And the Kenyan said he was there at a layover from Hong Kong going back to Kenya, and he kind of blew him off and left. And Keith explained that from that moment, Barack Barry, as he called him, just went nuts for about 3 months, demanding the truth be told by Frank, by his mom, by his grandfather, that he knows that Frank is the real father. He said that Frank looks like him, gives him money, spends time with him, and they've all lied to him. And eventually this was told to him, according to Keith. So that was the moment that, the story became known to Obama, I think, at that time, though he probably suspected it for a great deal of time.
Wow. In case you haven't heard, Infowars has become the most influential media outlet in America. We're making freedom go viral. And now we are proud to announce a new weapon in the epic battle against the globalists. Infowars Prime, where you can watch live high-definition feeds of The Alex Jones Show, plus exclusive insider videos from the Infowars crew and behind-the-scenes action. Go to Infowars.com/app and download today. Infowars Prime is available right now for your iPhone or Android. You will have access to exclusive videos that you can't see anywhere else. And that means live coverage of events and breaking news on location as it happens. You can also take advantage of amazing deals from the Infowars store that are only available for Infowars Prime subscribers. That's Infowars Prime at Infowars.com/app. And if you can hear my voice, you are the resistance.